Good morning, everybody. As she said, I am from Argentina, so sorry about my pronunciation in English. I promise to do the best. I am very honored to address the Catholic Social Minister Gathering organized by the United States Conference of the Catholic Bishop in this Jubilee year, 2025. It is a coincidence, but I started here on my very first visit to DC on my birthdays in December 2003. If you had told me that then I would be returning 21 years later as the curial representative of an Argentine Pope, what at that time was my archbishops, I would have been amazed. I am amazed now. This hotel is close to the Capitol. It is appropriate that this gathering be here, so close to the center of representation for those whom the Holy Father referred to the last Monday as the beloved American people. It is appropriate because it is possible to speak about hope without link with politics and economy. Why? Because, on the one hand, the theological virtue of hope is the dynamo that turns fear into organizing community. On the other hand, the Jubilee of Hope, it is in relationship with the message for the World Day of Peace 2025, where Pope Francis called for reducing or forgiving public debt. And to do that, it is necessary to organize hope to fix public debt as one of the main causes of poverty and migration. That is what I want to talk to you about, to talk about these couples, hope and organism, debt and migration, economy and politics, theology and ideology. If we mix it, we can read the reality. And, as we know, reality is superior to the idea. A month ago, the Jubilee of Hope started. And 5 days ago was the inauguration of Donald Trump as President of the United States of America. An inauguration often heralds a honeymoon of hope. However, there is an air of unrest because Catholic social workers feel that they are being called to supernatural effort. But, as Jesus Christ said, do not afraid, because as where sin abound, grace abound all the more, St. Pablo says. And because as where fear abound, hope abounds all the more, Pope Francis said. President Trump read from the script of his inaugural address to great applause, "We will not forget our God." And then he added an inscript side remarks, "Can do that." He is entirely right. In the book of Samuel, whenever David consults the will of God, he makes wise decisions. The American $1 bill has the inscription, "Anuit coeptis." It is, "He has blessed our undertaking." And this is true. In his January 20 message, the Holy Father said to the President Trump to offer prayers that Almighty God will grant you wisdom, strength, and protection in the exercise of your high duties. In addition to this prize, the Catholic Church can provide practical advice on how to apply wisdom and strength. In another inaugural aside, President Trump said, It is all common sense. The Catholic Church is a repository of common sense. We have a lot of history. Donald Trump is the 47th president. Pope Francis is the 266th successor of St. Peter. When George Washington was the first president, we were already in our 250 Vicar of Jesus Christ. We can offer the third pillar after tradition and the gospel, that is, the Catholic social magisterium. After this long introduction, I would like to detail Pope Francis' contribution to that magisterium under the framework of the organizing hope. As Secretary of the Latin American Commission, my challenge is to take care of the life and development of the particular Church of Latin America in collaboration with other dicastery of the Holy See. This is the Article 111 of the new Constitution of the Roman Curia, Predicate Evangelium. And there, Pope Francis don't speak about what we must tell about evangelization. He told us how to evangelize. And he said, with words and gestures, touching the suffering flesh of Jesus Christ in the people. This indicates that the Catholic social ministry must put its hands to work in concrete reality. And we can do it because we have the supernatural help of grace through theological virtues, faith, hope, and charity. Without this divine help, bridges cannot be built. However, building bridges, that is my challenge and my job, suppose, in addition to help of grace, organizing community between the particular American church from north to south and from south to north, because our people, migrants, at the end are pilgrims of hope. And to build bridges, it is possible because the three Americas have a long tradition in organizing community. It is organizing community that you call in the States popular movements, union workers, ecclesial networks, chamber of business, or educational networks. As we can see, the discarded people know very well that salvation supposes communitarian organization. On the contrary, they died. Communitarian organization means unity in the difference. And that knowledge as a continental reality is the start point of a Catholic social ministry. Sisters and brothers, as the threats to life are not longer localized in one country, neither in one subcontinent, but across an intercontinent. For that, the unity in difference must link the three Americas. So, as Pope Francis said, either we unite or we sink. Nos unimos o nos hundimos. So that it is necessary to build bridges of inclusion, reconciliation, and fraternity, as Pope Francis tells us in su saludo, that can connect this organizing community existing in ours, America, in order to begin together process of just transition, respecting the difference of each particular church. We can do it because we are united by the theological virtues, faith, love, and hope. But sadly, we are also united by different language, migration, theft of natural source, extractivism of critical minerals, private prisons, drug traffic, human traffic, and so many problems that can only be solved by addressing their causes. In the Latin American Catholic Church, we connect hope with economy, and we call it socio-environmental ecology. I must remember that this year is 10 years from Laudato Si. Why? Because that is like that, because in Latin America, Catholic social ministry is at the same time an organizing community around political and economical programs, but we call it con other names, ecclesiological network as REPAM, popular movements, or simply organizing community. That is only in Argentina and Brazil. In other words, we are not only united by faith in the same true God, by love for our Lord Jesus Christ and his Holy Mother Mary, and by hope for eternal life. Sadly, we are also united by fear, the contrary of the hope. There are millions of people who have faith in God but have lost trust in the community. They have love to God but have lost the capacity to love the humanity. That hope for eternal life, but they have lost the hope in a good and abundant life for all, for which Jesus Christ came, as himself tells us in the Gospel of John 10:10. These three theological virtues, faith, hope, love, are a gift from God that make us an army without weapons, as Pope Francis said in his letter to the popular movement during Holy Week in 2020. How is it? At the community level, faith must be translated into trust in the community. Love must be translated into social justice to guarantee a dignified life, universal access to goods, solidarity, and subsidiarity. And hope must be translated into organization. There we have connected, in the plane of Catholic social ministry, these 3 points of the theological method that allow the social teaching of the Church to advance by giving human response at every historical movement. Seeing from the faith, discernment from the gospel, and acting in communion. At the last plenary assembly of the Pontifical Commission for Latin America, Pope Francis tells us, La CAL, that is the name, must build bridges of inclusion, reconciliation, and fraternity. And in response to this request from the Holy Father, we are building bridges to connect the 3 Americas. Under the leadership of Cardinal Robert Prevost, we are building 3 bridges across the Americas. 1, bridges of inclusion through organized universities. 2, bridges of reconciliation to organized workers and entrepreneurs. And 3, bridges of fraternity through organized dioceses. It is CELAM and United States Bishop Conference. But how we build a bridge? The first thing is to have solid foundation that can support the weight of the load that moves over the bridge. That solidity is what we call solidarity. It is one of the 4 principles of the social teaching of the Church. But solidarity is the result of organizing community. It is not an individual act. Solidarity requires the personal decision to unite in order to be safe. And then, along the way, we see which was the strategy that made it possible. It is a good and abundant life. as our Lord Jesus Christ tells us. This unity is out of pure love. Being one as the Father is one. And at the same time, that is faith and hope. It is not necessary to unite with those who think like us. On the contrary, it is about unity in difference, because hope is the dynamo that mobilizes us to that. It is the unity that emerges from love as a theological virtus. The unity is pure grace. It is not a political unity, but allows us to arrive at it. That is why the common good is unity, to be as one, because what is common is unity. That is why we call it common unity, community. We are not doing politics. We are doing through politics as the highest form of charity, the kingdom of God. The Catholic Church is unity, and the solution it offers to social problems are neither political or economic. They are evangelical. The whole gospel calls us for unity. Far from social antagonisms, the Catholic preach unity in difference as the path to salvation. That is our contribution to politics in the chaos that every change of air generates. When this unity is embodied as solidarity, an organized community emerges, which seeks the mechanisms to guarantee two other principles of the social teaching: human dignity and universal access to create and develop goods. To do this, the organized community will dialogue with everyone. That is, as Francis said in Fratelli Tutti, the best politic. That, as the highest form of charity, seeks to guarantee social, economic, and ecological justice. The best policies, says Fratelli Tutti, is social dialogue, which is not between friends, but between parties in conflict, willing to put it on the table in search of an open agreement. However, social dialogue is not possible if there is not first an organized community that at the end of each part of the bridge, by which communication passes in the form of negotiation. If we think how is a bridge needs two solid bases to support the heavy over him. So that solid basis where the bridge is the organizing community. Social dialogue is the best tool that has been developed to guarantee social peace, but it presupposes organizing hope. The social dialogue must be between communities, not between individuals. However, in a world of shadows, that is the name of the first chapter of Fratelli Tutti, where the people are afraid because they are isolated, look it up to then take from them the last thing they have left hope through. I'm sorry. I must read again. Where the people are afraid because they are isolated, lock it up to then take from them the last thing that they have left, hope. And the others, the enemy, take that hope through false mystic of communitarian salvation. This is Fratelli Tutti. This is why Latin America popular movements are an organizing community that manifested themselves in public space as a new mode of democratic participation politics. Public space are the only space left to them after being excluded from the world of work. Unity is a social practice, not just a discourse. That is why Pope Francis said in Fratelli Tutti, the great theme is work, because it creates space for communication between people and make it possible to organize in hope, not for food, but for dignity across all the life. Returning to the three theological virtues, we must keep in mind, as Francis told us, that they are our supernatural weapon to take care and save creation in a world of shadows, such as the one we inhabit in every change of the area where false religions take the place of the politics. However, the enemy with capital E, that is the evil, which is not a person, prevents the unity that makes community organization possible. The evil, which always appears under the gaze of good, takes the hope of isolated person and organizes the hope into the contrary direction. Today, we can see a pseudo-religious narrative replace the Catholic social teaching. However, in isolation, first, solidarity and subsidiarity cannot be realized. Second, human dignity is threatened. Third, the enemy organized the hope. Just looking at the last presidential campaign around the world, we can understand why it is necessary to return to an embodied communication, to organize community as communitarian salvation mystic. That is why Francis, in the chanting of the spoke, tell us not to let our hope to be stolen from us, and call us, the Catholics, to organizing hope. But how can we do it? We all know the four principles of Evangelii Gaudium. Reality is greater than the idea. The whole is greater than the part. Unity is greater than conflict. Time is greater than space. These last principles, it is time is greater than the space, is expanded by Francis in his dialogue with the students, university students in Africa, with the fifth principle. Organization is greater than time. This is the church, a loving organization that, by the grace of God, that is, by the theological virtues, subsists in time beyond the space of the power, overcomes the division that causes conflict between parties, maintain unity in the difference without stopping at conflict, and desacralize ideology built outside the suffering flesh of Christ in the people. For all this, the Catholic organizing community is greater than political time. That is why it is a not to start process, because others will follow. The poor know this because they start the process with the hope that their children will have a more dignity life. They know that the organization conquers time. This is the church of the borders. Why does Pope Francis call us to organize hope? Because hope is never lost, but it can be manipulated. Hope can be politically manipulated. Careful. When we do that, we are not doing theology, but ideology. And that is the worst politics. Therefore, we must go out as church, but building bridges of communication without leaving anyone outside or behind. People isolated will be manipulated through the hope. Let us not be afraid. Fear is a natural passion that we must transform into communitarian organization. Francisco said this in his second discourse to the popular movement in Santa Cruz de la Sierra, to convert the passion in communitarian action. That is organization. That is the best politics. Otherwise, alone, we will easily be paralyzed. Pope Francis called us to be apostoles, which means to move forward without fear. Ultimately, this is the path to holiness. And the history of the Church is full of signs. The signs of the next door, called Pope Francis in Exultate Gaudium. We have a jubilee year to walk together as pilgrims of hope, from north to south, and from south to north. I am here to invite all of you to work together with Latin America, Central America, and the Caribbean. And at last, I would like to read a sentence that Pope Francis said yesterday in the Vísperas de San Pablo about the hope. He said, "Dear brothers and sisters, let us never forget that hope does not disappoint. Hope never disappoints. Hope is like a rope anchor on the shore that we climb to. It never disappoints." Es un ancla que yo tiro lejos, muy lejos, y luego voy traccionando hasta llegar a ese lugar. Thank you so much.
Gracias, Dr. Cuda, for your tireless work, for your inspiring words. To not let our hope be stolen from us, but instead to organize hope. I feel very blessed that we're very well represented at the Vatican with the leadership of Dr. Cuda. As we move into the panel conversation portion of our session, I am pleased to introduce Alexandra Carroll, who serves as Director of the Catholic Campaign for Human Development.
Good morning, everyone. It's truly a pleasure to be with you today. As Leah mentioned, my name is Alexandra Carroll, and I am the Director of the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, or CCHD. Before we begin our panel discussion, I'd like to take a moment just to introduce this conversation. As you know, Dr. Cuda has been working on behalf of the Vatican to help communities build hope through organizing around the world. Today, we are privileged to hear from members of the Recognizing the Stranger initiative of the Industrial Areas Foundation West-Southwest region, as well as our moderator, Cecilia Flores. Some of you may know the work of Recognizing the Stranger from your dioceses. What you may not realize is that this remarkable initiative was made possible by a significant grant from CCHD. We are so proud to have supported a project that is building hope, strengthening communities, and transforming parishes into places of solidarity for our most vulnerable sisters and brothers. I hope today's session inspires you to reflect on how community organizing can be a tool for renewal in your own parishes and communities. For 55 years, CCHD has supported work like this, bringing the gospel's call to justice and hope to life. I'm particularly excited to see the connections between the international efforts of Dr. Cuda and the work happening here in our own country. With that, it is my absolute honor to introduce Cecilia Flores, our moderator, and our panelists who will lead us in this conversation. Ms. Cecilia Flores is the daughter of Leo and Marie and the mother of Cara and Jacob. Cecilia currently serves as the executive director of the Catholic Volunteer Network and holds a MA in Global Development and Social Justice from St. John's University. She has spent over 15 years working with communities of faith to address poverty and injustice in the US and Central America through the formation and development of youth, young adults, and women. Welcome, Cecilia. For our panelists, we are very honored to be joined by Joe Rubio, who is the National Co-Director of the Industrial Areas Foundation West-Southwest region. The region works across 33 broad-based organizations in the Western US and around the world. Joe is the founding director of the Recognizing the Stranger strategy to train immigrant parish leaders in 20 dioceses. Elizabeth Valdez is the director of the Texas Industrial Areas Foundation network of organizations and has organized with the West-Southwest IAF for 40 years. Her organizing work along the Texas-Mexico border has helped create infrastructure and services that were lacking on the US side of the border. Welcome, Elizabeth. And with that, I will turn it over to our moderator, Cecilia, for this inspiring conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexandra. Just another round of applause for Dr. Cuda for everything she shared, your wisdom. After I graduated from college at the age of 21, I actually moved to Honduras in 2008, and I remember that was right around the time after Aparecida, when the Misión Continental was really like taking off. And something, I stayed there for 6 years and I came back to the US. And as a daughter of immigrants, I realized that oftentimes here in the US, we have a very limited perspective on what is actually happening around the world. And immigration has always been a big topic on my heart because I'm the child of immigrants. And my dad did a very good job at connecting us to the motherland. And that was something I was very happy about. And just the way that you spoke about connecting the North and the South, I think is so important because that is part of the story that sometimes I think here we don't think about unless you are the child of immigrants or you understand how difficult those pathways are and how difficult those journeys are and adjustments. It can be often hard to understand why people would immigrate or what people are actually experiencing. And I think that's something we have to continue to talk about. So thank you for sharing those points. It's a great reminder. And I'm excited actually to hear more about recognizing the stranger and the efforts of the IAF, particularly on the border around this initiative. I know right now in our country, and in our church, it can be hard sometimes. We're talking about being missionaries of hope, but I know a lot of conversations I have, and I'm guilty of this myself. It can be a little hard to find that hope when we talk about the reality being, greater than the idea. Sometimes what we are receiving and the narrative that we're hearing, the reality doesn't sound so good, but then I remember we have things like Recognizing the Stranger and other initiatives that are the story of how our church is being a missionary church of hope. So perhaps Joe and Elizabeth, can you share what is Recognizing the Stranger and how do you all see that as a way to bring hope and be missionaries of hope in today's world and climate?
Thank you, Cecilia. Again, I'm Joe Rubio. I'm the National Co-Director of the Industrial Areas Foundation for the West-Southwest region. The IAF is a national entity with 60 organizations, and then we also work with sister organizations globally in the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, and beginning, particularly with the help of Dr. Cuda and the relationships that she has developed, potential in Latin America. I'm the grandson of refugees from the Mexican Revolution. And if it was not for Guardian Angel Parish in El Paso, they would not have known how to integrate and acculturate into this country. And part of the American political tradition has been the immigrant parish that has helped to incorporate the newcomer. And the IAF tradition began with immigrant organizing in the back of the yards in Chicago to help bring those at the margins into democratic life and practice so that they could learn a healthy politics. Recognizing the stranger is, in a sense, the current phase of that type of work. We were despairing 10, 15 years ago about the inability of our legislators down the street to do something constructive about immigration reform. We thought, how do we begin to look at something constructive to protect the immigrant community and to also allow them to participate in politics, in public life, and to feel included and integrated into our society? Well, the answer then meant we've got to go local. And working with CCHD and Alexandra, thank you for what you all have done for the past 55 years, began a strategy working with 20 dioceses and our local bishops very carefully to select areas and parishes where there were growing immigrant leadership and begin to incorporate them into those parish communities so that they could see that there was a way that they did not need to remain in the shadows, that they could be active agents in the direction of how their lives and their communities operated. And since then, we have worked with 370 parishes, trained 5,000 leaders, and just lots of local success that has come out of that in terms of looking at community safety, in terms of looking at work and wage theft, in terms of looking at how we address the pandemic and healthcare and other issues, where immigrant leaders saw themselves working side by side with their citizen counterparts in their parishes. And what we're learning is that we share those same families as the Latin American church because they're coming here. And one of our key insights into this is that baptism does not stop at the border. We have a collective responsibility for the well-being of families in this hemisphere.
Thank you.
Now, if I may add,
Yes, of course.
I'm also the granddaughter of an immigrant coming in from Mexico. My grandfather was involved in the Cristero movement back in that day and ended up here along this side of the border. And Joe is right, especially living along the border, you can't tell the difference in terms of who is a U.S. citizen and who is not. It is when you give people an opportunity to say, we can work together to bring about change in our community, and especially along the border. Back when I started organizing, one of the things that we learned through listening sessions, which is part of the synodal process, that there were families living along the border that didn't have the basic infrastructure, didn't have water, didn't have paved streets, didn't have schools in their neighborhood and so forth. And we thought back then that it was just a phenomena that was happening in South Texas. In studies being done, we learned that 20% of the Texas families who lived along the border lived in these conditions. And it was unscrupulous developers that allowed that to happen. So the communities organized, not just along the border, with our sister organizations in the state, and were able to stop the proliferation of colonias. And today, it's a new world for those families. And it did not, and the stereotype that people had, well, the people that live there in those conditions are not citizens. I mean, they're immigrants, come to learn. It was a mix of both. It was immigrants and non-immigrants, families that could not afford housing in cities that ended up living in these conditions. So yes, hope needs to be organized. when people became organized, it gave them hope. And when they saw their communities change, their hope just grew to bigger and better things.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's great to hear, I think, practical things that are happening that really a lot of people probably see in their communities, whether they're on the border or not. I wanted to touch on politics for a second because, you know, we will be doing congressional visits later this week. I think here in the US, my experience has been that a lot of people in church circles sometimes don't want to mix politics and faith, or they don't necessarily see how those things connect. Obviously, we in this room do not believe that. That's why we're here. But, you know, Dr. Cuda, you had mentioned politics as a form of charity. You know, we're talking about how we interface. What is, you know, Pope Francis has the concept of a better kind of politics. What does that mean to each of you here? Because I think that would just be interesting to hear what that means for people who are on the ground doing work, but also from people who are studying theology and how all of that connects.
Well, first, the people who said that not mix politics and religion are doing politics. Second, if we don't do politics, what we do? Kill people? Totalitarianism? Authoritarianism? No, this is serious. Politics is public war. If we stop that, politics, a democratic politics, a social dialogue, what we can do? Authoritarianisms, prisons, totalitarianisms? So careful with that. One thing is a priest can be candidate, but Catholic people are citizens. We must defend the politics, the democratic politics, because on the contrary, we are going to an authoritarian system. That is true.
I think it's important to reclaim the term politics and what it means to be political. It's not, as commonly distorted right now, it's the intrigue or the manipulation or, you know, the messaging around, you know, perceived preferences. But politics really is about the well-being of the city, the polis, and how we engage one another as individuals about, and really engage in that social dialogue where those who we disagree with, understand their interests, take them seriously, and come to some sort of negotiated compromise. That is the root of politics. So many leaders in parishes that we've been working with for Recognizing the Stranger says, well, I like this, but why should we be political? Well, to be political is to help to shape your community and to do it around our vision and our values and imagination. That is the good politics. And there are habits and skills and dispositions that we teach in organizing to be able to do that. Primarily, how do you have a conversation with someone who is different from you and sit down with them and get to understand their reality? To be political also requires that you have power in standing, that you are recognized to be part of that conversation. And that's why we need what we call broad-based organizations that come together. In our organizations, there are institutional members, parishes, congregations, unions, nonprofits, organizations who come together so that they have the ability to be at the decision-making table and to deal with the political decisions of those communities so that they can do that type of work.
I would add that it also needs to be coupled with power. And by power, I mean the definition of being able to act. So you got to act upon it. It's not partisan politics. Our network is nonpartisan. We didn't endorse political parties or candidates. It's not elections and only going out to vote for elections. And in fact, for us, we say the definition of a citizen is not necessarily that person that is born in the United States, but the person that takes responsibility for their community and acts on behalf of their community is what a true citizen is. And so negotiating, compromising, acting on behalf of a community to have work toward the common good and create a better community for our families and our children is what we say politics should be about.
That's great. Thank you for sharing your insights. Also, just quick reminder, there are cards on all the tables if you have a question you would like to add to the panel, and a staff member will come get that. I do have a couple questions now from the audience, and actually they tie really well into what you've discussed. Now, this one is mentioning community organizing. That, yeah, there are some people in the room who aren't familiar. What is community organizing? What do we mean when we say community organizing, and what does that entail when we're talking about community organizing?
You want to go first? Go ahead. All right. Oh, okay. Or a team.
We got to organize ourselves
That's
to be
right.
able to respond to that.
You're watching it happen live.
Well, I do like, well, we'll talk about it practically, but the notion of organizing hope really is at the root of organizing. Organizing is about how you build power in a community to include those who traditionally have not been part of decision making to be able to do that. In a practical way, that means that we need institutions that at the local level where people's lives intersect. What we call mediating institutions. These can be congregations, schools, nonprofits, unions, as I said before. Now, there are different brands of organizing, but to be able to give it longevity and to have the organization that Pope Francis is speaking to, we need something that will endure, where people will have a platform that they have built that no matter what the issue is that they're concerned at, that they have a vehicle to be able to be at the decision-making table and to build that with others. So the practices are that you join an organization through your institution, and there's leadership training. You learn the practices of relational meetings and house meetings. We identify leaders, we build teams, and they begin to look at what are the concerns in their community. They go forth and listen to what is happening and develop an agenda out of that and build a different community that can then act around its interests. What would you add to that?
I would say that our experience has been that people who are the decision makers in a community, the people with power, respond to power. So you need to organize power in your community to be able to be at the table where those decisions are being done about housing, funding of public education, access to health care, and so forth. If you're not at the table, then you're out of the decision-making process. So how do we build enough power in a community, institutional power, so that we can be at those tables? And one example that I would say is that when the pandemic, and to our surprise, we were even able to organize during the pandemic, learning through Zoom and virtual meetings and so forth, the organizing didn't stop. And so one of the things that we learned is that the country shut down, I think it was March 17th. Well, what happens 2 weeks later if you're renting? Your rent is due. So families in Houston were being threatened by being evicted. So people were coming to us scared to say, where are we going to go shelter, because our families are already starting to pile up. And so we organized in that community, and we went before the city council, and we learned that the city, between the city and the county, they were going to receive $600 million. And we said, of the $600 million, we want $200 million to be allocated for rent assistance, because half of the population in Houston rents. And in that, we found out that not only was it enough to allocate that funding, but then to have it accessible for low-income families, for elderly, those that did not have the technology to be able to upload all the documents that were being required. So holding the city accountable and the county accountable to making sure that the most vulnerable as well were eligible for those fundings. And so it happened not just in Houston, but around our network, that the organizations were leveraging money for rent assistance for families, low-income families in their community.
Yeah, and around that same period of time, California was providing earned income tax credit for low-income families, but we found out that the undocumented were not included.
Yes.
So we did lots of conversations with the undocumented, and there were a number of those leaders who came forth out of that conversation who were willing to get into conversations with their legislators. And as a result of that, and the California Catholic Conference was very supportive of that, by the way, working with those dioceses that came out of, legislation was passed that included the undocumented in that pandemic response.
That's right.
But the undocumented were able to have a voice and a platform because of that.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's, yeah, that round of applause. I think the pandemic was just such an interesting time because it highlighted so many community needs and broken systems and things like that. Now, we were talking about power as the ability to act, and what you all are talking about, interfacing with government, going to city council. I know personally when I speak to people who are experiencing hardship, oftentimes they believe, that's a waste of time, right? Nothing's going to happen, or they don't feel even safe to enter some of those spaces. And having been a community organizer as well, I think a lot of the magic, I call it, of organizing was taking people through the personal journey, right, of feeling powerless or feeling that, life is happening to them, not that, and they don't have any agency, to then being in a position where they're speaking in front of a city council or going to visit Capitol Hill, like on Tuesday, to talk to a congressperson or a staff member. Can you share a little bit about that process? Because there's something so, I think, beautiful, but about how people evolve when they're involved in organizing, but also how transformative that can be for you all that are involved in the work accompanying these people. Do you have any maybe stories you'd like to share, or people that come to mind that can really highlight the relational piece of community organizing?
Well, the one person that comes to my mind right now is Carmen Trevino, who lives in Brazoria County. And when the pandemic happened, this rent assistance money that was made available to the counties, their county had decided that there was no need in that county for rent assistance. Therefore, they were going to return $11 million back to the state. And so the leaders were like, wait a minute, we do need rent assistance. In fact, we can share with you the stories of the people that need it. And so they went before Commissioner's Court. Now, mind you, these are all, and excuse what I'm about to say, these were all white men who had made their decision that they were going to return the money. Here goes this community of Hispanic women going and advocating for the rent assistance money to stay. And they took actual stories, including their own, of how the money was needed. To their surprise, they were able to impact the $11 million to stay in Brazoria County and help the families apply for that funding, so that they helped over 1,000 families in Brazoria County where they had initially said there was no need. So Carmen says, oh my God, I did not know that I could even go before a county person, and much less a group of 5 men to advocate for my community. So that just transformed her and other colleagues that saw her to say, I want to become Carmen.
That's beautiful.
Well, the parish is a place of formation. And it is a place where leaders can begin to see themselves as having ownership in the parish and helping to, address things in that community and feel successful. What attracted me to organizing was early on in Houston, seeing a number of families who were just very distraught at the safety of a neighborhood, African American and Latino, that I lived in my home parish in St. Joseph's, where children were basically targets of crime. They were living next door to cantinas that had prostitution and drug running. And they learned to shut it down. They had been trying for years to do that and were despairing, but through organizing, they learned how the politics of the city and the county worked. They brought together other neighbors together And they were able to create a strategy for that neighborhood to tear down dangerous buildings, to remove the liquor licenses for those establishments, and to create after-school programs in their neighborhood. It transformed things. These people began to see that they could win something, they could be successful, and they threw a very nice party afterwards.
Thank you for highlighting that, because I think it's so important that, at the heart of community organizing is community, and it can sound very intimidating, all of the politics and speaking before a city council and things like that. We have a question from the audience about being political, and the question is, we had mentioned that we're political but we're not partisan. What does that mean, or how do we, and the question here says, like, can we clarify how do we engage in politics but at the same time remain nonpartisan?
Well, I think Dr. Cuda started it very well with her comment on that this is not about being partisan. It is interesting, I have organized my 40 years. I started as a child when I started organizing, all right? So, but my organizing career for the most part has been in Texas. Who rules Texas? Every issue that we have won, whether it has been bringing water and wastewater to those colonias, those communities along the border, whether it's been access to indigent health care, creating the first legislation in the state to provide indigent health care for low-income families, whether it's been increasing public school funding, whether it's been workforce development, creating the first state fund for workforce strategies around the state to get people into real jobs. It has been under the leadership of a Republican legislature and governor. So it is learning that even though people, sometimes we stereotype people, that we say they're Republican, therefore they don't care. And no, that is not the case. There are people on both sides of the aisle that care about the issues. It is when you localize it, when you say, this is what's happening in our community, this is what's happening to your voters in your community, and how can we work together to bring about that change, that you can get people on board. And so it is not stereotyping people, but it is learning how do we work together to bring about those change, and finding what are their interests and what are the common interests that we can find together so that we can be successful for the families that are in great need in our communities.
That's great. Now, I have a whole stack of questions, and I also have a timer right here that is telling me I cannot get to all of these. So if we didn't get to your question, find us in the hallway, and maybe we can talk about it over lunch or at a coffee break. I just wanted to kind of bring it all home. There was a great question here that I think ties in to what Dr. Cuda had spoken at the beginning. Now, having heard, the experience and the project of recognizing the stranger here, that's a very local effort. How do you see the work that they're doing connect to everything that you're exploring, I think, one, in the Americas, and, at the global level? What resonates for you, or what do you find interesting about what we're doing here, how communities are organizing in the US as it compares to other things that you're seeing around the world?
I would like to go back to the other question.
Okay.
And then,
so whoever's question this was, sorry.
This is strange when I listen. Do politics, but not partidarian politics. What is that? Because one thing is a priest, a bishop. Other thing is the lay people. Who Catholic people resist to do partidarian politics. Who do that? I told you one history. In this city, Washington, D.C., there is a big, big Catholic university. The big Catholic university here, Pontifical. I don't know if some of you know how that Catholic university born. That Catholic university born after a long fight for Irish bishops, because the son and daughter of the workers can go to the university. if that some of the workers that always are migrants can go to the university, they never can arrive to the capital to have a chair for to do the law. Mm-hmm. Because the other university shorthand was for the rich people, and they was not Catholics. So these bishops, migrant bishops, try to get this for the son of migrant to arrive to the capital, and that is the same in all the countries, for to do the law. And for to do that, you must be organized in political parties. So another thing is you have a party, but party is not the finality, it's only a tool for our faith, our principles. Finally, a community organized is the fourth principle of the doctrine of the church, the social doctrine of the church, is subsidiarity. This is important to remember this. Because if we repeat subsidiarity, solidarity, and then we resist, and we say, no, political parties is the evil, so this is a contradiction, because I don't know other mode to do, in concrete, subsidiarity and solidarity outside an organized politics, and that is the political party. Because if we have not that, we have outsiders from the politics. Now, what we do? We work hard, of course. North America, Central America, Latin America, and the Caribbean are absolutely different church. Why? Because the social and economical condition was different. And for 200 years, for 1,000 years, in the actuality. At the same time, it's not the same. South America and Central America. For example, in the case of migration, I am from Argentina, and the people, this is interesting because it's not easy to see Argentine or Brazilian migration, workers' migration. Why? Because in those countries, the union workers was absolutely strong. And the church was who do that between the workers. We have a long history of organization. So when we have problem in Brazil or in Argentina, the people do politics. They don't start to walk. They stay in their territory, arrive to the unity, and try to get that their necessities will be recognized by the state as a right. And then we have the law. This is different in the Bolivarian or Andinian countries or in Central America. And which is the difference? The difference is the industrial development. If you have a fábrica, ¿cómo se dice una? Factory. You have people together 6 days at the week, 8 hours. When they arrive there, they think that their awful life is because God never blessed them. Oh, I do something. But after 6 months or a year, they start to think that their situation is not because they lost the grace. It's a consequence of social injustice. And they start to argue. So to do politics is not a conclusion after a study at the university. To do politics is a decision. This is why Pope Francis said, first, unity, then the strategy. This is important.